Hey y'all, it's Ashley at the Realm of Kidlit Comics, and I am here, as you can see by the title of this video, to do my mid-month wrap-up. Now, this was supposed to happen much earlier in the month. I think this was supposed to go up last week, but 2025 came in with a vicious vengeance, you know, for its predecessor. I thought its predecessor was rough, and unfortunately, its predecessor pretty much had nothing on how this year decided to start. We are about 3 weeks in the year, and I had a death in the family, which hit pretty hard. And I am still definitely going and will be going through my own personal grieving process. And then like 2 days after I found out about the death in the family, me and baby got flu. So I'm still recovering from that. I don't have any of the body aches and fever or anything like that. Whatever strain I did have, like, took me the heck out. But I do have that post-viral cough. So I've been coughing a lot, and I have not felt comfortable filming. I have not felt comfortable doing anything. I'm still battling fatigue. And thankfully my breathing is okay, but I know my body and my lungs so badly want to cut the fuck up. And I refuse to let that happen. So if I sound a little winded, if I sound like I'm talking slower, it's because I'm still trying to be mindful of my body and check in with myself as I'm doing this process. So this is going up later than I had originally planned, but life happens. I have been doing well with my reading so far this year. I am going to be talking about everything that I read so far. I am not going to talk about any of the adult materials. I have started kind of reviewing and keeping up with that content for patrons. So if you want to hear me talk more about the adult content that I'm reading, you can sign up. The lowest tier is $2, and you get additional content there. But we're gonna go ahead and dive into what I have read, and I have read a lot considering like everything. I've really I've really powered through, and not forcing myself, but it's a safe space for me. Reading has always been a safe space for me to kind of help cope and manage feelings that I'm dealing with. I always have to be very careful too when it comes to my reading about not getting so lost into it that I'm not dealing with. But I feel like I've read under what I typically would be reading at this point. So I'm reading and it's helping me, but I'm not overcompensating for problems that I've been dealing with. So we are going to, I'm not going to break it up into my age categories. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk about them chronologically, and then when we do our end of the month wrap up at the beginning of February, then I'll break everything into their respective age categories. So I started the year off finishing a graphic novel, and that is Anzu in the Realm of Darkness. I don't know why this one took me so long to read. I had that graphic novel out from the library for a very, very long time. Don't know why, but it focuses on a young girl by the name of Anzu who ends up moving to a new town. She's still dealing with the grief of her grandmother, and she ends up getting tied up into this magical world. And this magical world is based on Shintoism and Buddhism, and it takes kind of those elements and blends them together, where she goes into what is the afterlife, but she's living, so she's not technically supposed to be there. And she meets a character that is kind of the gatekeeper but there's some issues happening with the gate between their world and what would be our world. And she finds out that there is a entity that has been essentially stealing the souls of children. They've been going missing in her world and nobody can figure out what's happening. And it all has to do with this entity that has some really weird perceptions of children and how children should be serving her and a part of her world. It's very strange. It's a very, very strange situation. But I ended up really, really liking it. I love Anzu's character. I think she goes through a very good character arc of development. I think that the way that she handles her grief is very evident on every single page, and I'm actually glad I didn't read this prior. I'm glad I read this prior to finding out about our family's loss, because I think this would have been a lot more difficult because she's grieving the loss of her grandmother, and I know that that would have been very, very difficult for me to deal with after finding about the passing of my own grandmother. But I think that going back now and thinking about it, I think that she handled it very, very well. The art was amazing. I love the color scheme. Purple is a very dominant color palette or color that was in the palette that they chose, and it was absolutely beautiful. But overall, it was a good graphic novel that tackled themes like belonging and identity and family and grief. And I think that essence of belonging is something that I love to see in middle grade materials, regardless of whether it's a graphic novel or prose. Like, I love seeing that because it's something that a lot of middle grade aged kids deal with. So it's always nice to see that thematically when it's done well, and I do think that it was done very, very well in this one, and I ended up giving that one 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so after that, I actually ended up finding my first 5-star read of the year, and I loved it. I loved it so much I went ahead and got a copy, and that is Read by Annie Carty. This is a book that released at the beginning, maybe like first quarter-ish time of 2024, and I hadn't gotten to it, and I ended up actually picking it up because I was about to take a bath and I wanted something to read, and I told my kid, like, hey, pick out any book that you see on my desk in my room and I'll read it. And she was like, oh, I kind of like the cover of this one. She picked it out and I ended up reading it in a day. It was really, really good. So it focuses on a main character by the name of Tess. And at the beginning of the book, we find out that Tess has moved to this new town. And it gives her kind of this sense of belonging that she didn't have after her father passes away. So she's dealing with the grief of her father's passing, and her mother ends up in such a financial struggle that she has to move back in with her parents. So they move to this smaller town where a huge portion of the community is really, really involved in the church. And so she gets involved in the church, and particularly the youth group, and she absolutely loves it. She feels this sense of community and friendship amongst everyone. And then we find out that Tess is pregnant. And we don't know at the beginning of the novel who the father of the child is. Her mother does ask her, hey, who is the father? She's like, it's not important. Somebody in youth group. It was one time. Ended up pregnant. So her mom is very supportive, which is something that I really, really like, because we have a mom who's very much so like, what do you feel is best? This is your body. It's your choice. What would you like to do? I'm going to support you in either direction. And she ends up essentially saying, like, you know, I can't do this. I want to have an abortion. And so her mother takes her to have an abortion, and somehow, some way, they go out of town to have the abortion. And somehow, some way, a picture is taken of Tess at the clinic, and then that picture is kind of spread all over the place, and she starts getting harassed by people, like text messages and everything. And eventually it spreads to the town, and it falls from there. This is a loose retelling of the Scarlet Letter. If I could get that out. It's a loose retelling of the Scarlet Letter, if that gives you any type of idea of what you would be dealing with going into this. This is not just about like bodily autonomy. It is, but it also deals heavily with religious trauma. And it's very, very interesting and very twisted when everything starts to unravel and you as a reader are able to put two and two together. You're like, holy crap. And it speaks to how a woman is persecuted and judged for pregnancy out of wedlock, especially in religious communities, and yet the same standard is not held for the father in this situation. There are no consequences, and we see that play out. We see the misogyny that exists. We see how religion trumps everything. There are no conversations about how this has impacted Tessa's mental health. How is she coping and dealing with this? It's more so about, look at what you did. You have sinned. If you just repent, God will forgive you and everything will be fine. And in her mind, what I do like is that Annie does challenge that simply repenting doesn't change what I've been through. And what if I'm not sorry? What if I made this choice because it was the best option for me and it's the option that I needed? I'm not sorry for it. Do I want a relationship with God? Yes, but I wouldn't change what I've done. And that's a huge component of this as well. I will say that grooming is a huge part of this. I don't want to get into too many particulars because I don't want to spoil how everything unfolds, but there's a broader conversation of women feeling able to speak out, especially when we're talking about grooming, sexual assault, rape, and the dichotomy between generations and levels of comfort and being able to speak out. It changes from generation to generation. And it's, I would say, like, you know, my generation and generations that are coming after me feel more empowered to speak out as opposed to my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. And I have seen that myself in real time, not just about this, but about a lot of different things, because society did not permit those conversations to happen. And we see a lot of that answered and challenged in this book, which I really appreciated. I think that this was very well written and was a surprise for me in terms of 5 stars. I did not know what I was going to get into when I was given this book, because I didn't pick this book out for myself. My 5-year-old picked this book out for me. And the fact that she picked out my first 5-star of the year, and it is such a important conversation to have, considering what the United States is currently dealing with in terms of body autonomy and a woman's right to choose what to do with her body. And the fact that I am a woman and I'm raising a little girl, I just felt like there was a little bit of shock there, I think, that of all the books that were on my desk, like, this was the one that she ended up choosing, because these are conversations that we will have one day. I adored this. It was really, really good, and I'm happy that I did end up reading it and that it was my first 5-star of the year. Now, after that, I did end up reading 5 picture books. I'm just going to tell you what the picture books were, and give you my rating for each picture book. I read Our Building by Joseph Coelho. I gave that one 3 stars. Dear Black Child by Rama Rodha, I gave that one 4 stars. Song for August, The Inspiring Life of Playwright August Wilson. This is an informational picture book. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and it's by Sally Denmead. Then I read another informational picture book, and it was 5 Stories by Ellen Weinstein. I gave this one 3.5. And then the last one I ended up reading was I Know How to Draw an Owl by Hilary Horder Hipley, and I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Now, I am planning to read more picture books. I was trying to finish up some stuff from 2024, and at the time before I had gotten sick, it was only 1 week's worth of picture book releases, and I had to wait. I put myself on hold, and they all hadn't come in via shipment to our library yet. So my picture book number probably will increase by the time that we get to the end of the year. I haven't really decided how I want to wrap these up. Y'all let me know. Would you like to see a separate picture book wrap up if it's something that I am capable of doing? Because I would love to go into some detail, or maybe I should just highlight like my top picture books for the month. Because there are some months where I end up reading 50, 60 picture books, and wrapping all those up, to be quite frank with you, is just not, it's not a feasible thing for me to do. But let me know if y'all have any ideas about how you think that should go. Okay, so the next one that I ended up reading was Us in Ruins by Rachel Moore. I had been wanting to check out a Rachel Moore book, and I can't remember. She had one that came out before this, and I'm debating on whether I want to go back and read that one or not. But this one came out in 2024, and I had been meaning to get to it. My hold on library came in, and then I needed to finish it because someone else was waiting on it behind me, and I didn't want my Libby hold to lapse. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and pump this one out. Us in Ruins is it feels like a mix between fantasy, historical fiction, adventure, and romance. It's like a hogwash of different things. We are focusing on a main character by the name of Margaret, who is dealing with a lot of different things. Her parents are separated, but her mother kind of just abandoned her, and her father isn't as attentive as he should be, and she has a habit of starting and stopping a lot of activities. And so she really wants to solve this mystery tied to the vase of Venus Aurelia, which it hasn't been seen since the 1930s, and it's attached to this other archaeologist by the name of Van. And so she wants to go on this class trip to Pompeii based off of his journal entries and kind of figure out like how to solve this mystery. So she wasn't supposed to go to Pompeii at all. Her dad doesn't even know that she's gone to Pompeii. She does it anyway. She gets into the program, and when she gets there, she finds a statue of Van that looks very much like him. And this is where kind of like the magical, fantastical part comes in, where he's been turned into stone, because you do get a flashback of what he was doing, and she does some things that brings him back to life, and so he's kind of thrown into the modern day setting. And so the two of them work together where they have to solve these different riddles in order to get this vase back together, and it's supposed to give you like your greatest heart's desires, which for some people I think is wealth. I think for her it's I think more so, when I think about it in the grand scheme of things, it just felt like positive attention. That's what it felt like for me, like positive attention. I was excited to dive into this because I don't think I've really read anything like this. It definitely reminded me a lot of a mix between like Tomb Raider and like, I don't know, Lara Croft, Indiana Jones, like that type of vibe. It definitely gave me like that mixture of characters, and I really enjoyed that. I think the world building was really interesting and really good, and I thought that it was a very engaging adventure. Like the riddle aspect of it, when the two of them had to solve different riddles attached to trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, it really made me feel like I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, whether those movies hold up or not is a completely different conversation, but that's how well she wrote those specific scenes. And it was very clear that Moore did a lot of research. There was a lot of ideation that went into crafting these scenarios, this world, this legend. Like, it was very, very well developed. And if I simply was going off of that, like the world itself and just the adventure piece of it, I probably would have given this book 4 stars. But I ended up going with a 3.5 because Margot, I think I called the girl Margaret. Margot, to me, was very unevenly developed. She's going through a lot, and I don't want to say that this is necessarily attached to her emotional moments that she had within the course of the book, because it wasn't, because there are a lot. She cries at the drop of a dime, which is fine. I can be the same exact way. But it was this constant back and forth where it never felt like her character got the chance to grow. It was almost like I wanted her to feel everything she needed to feel and then head on a path of healing and growing. And I felt like we would step into it and then step out, step in and step out. And so I was getting a lot of whiplash dealing with her as a character. And then, to be fair and honest, like, Van was there, but I really wasn't invested in him as a character. I didn't really care for him either way. It's not like I had a strong dislike, but I also I wasn't like, oh, fangirling over Van. It really wasn't one of those things. And so as a result, the romance that existed between them, which also, once again, it's one of those weird scenarios because it's like, he's not older than her by a lot. Like, he's really not. But then it's weird because he came from the 1930s and now he's in there. It's always weird when you deal with the magical elements there. And so nothing untoward or anything weird in that sense. Like, we're not talking like Twilight cringe. Nothing like that. But I think because I wasn't invested in him or his character development, their romance to me was just like, I don't care either way. Like, your romance doesn't really mean much to me. And so that took the elevation of the novel as a whole down a couple of steps. Because it's like, I'm into this adventure. I'm into, like, when they were teaming up and working together and solving things, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Even when they got to the end and they had to figure out, like, okay, how do we navigate this very last section? And they were able to kind of work their way around it. I thought those moments were so genuine and so cool. But I don't feel like there needed to be a romance. And I didn't buy it at all. I didn't buy it. I didn't care for it. It wasn't my thing. That's not to say that I won't check out Rachel's books in the future. I really hope she does more young adult adventure, because I do think we need more of those. A young adult is very much so run by fantasy right now. And I would love to see something like this adventure-esque aspect of it, because it is fun. I just think that the character work, we needed a little bit more. Sorry if the angle changed a little bit. I had to do some things with that memory card because I didn't realize it was almost full. Okay, after I ended up finishing Us in Ruins, I did end up finishing Shiny Misfits. And Shiny Misfits is a middle grade graphic novel by Maysoon Zaid. And I have so many conflicted feelings about this one. So it follows a main character who has cerebral palsy, which I love. I've been trying to make sure I up the number of books that I'm reading with disability representation in them. And this is one that I had been looking forward to reading because I knew it had the disability representation in it. And I like the way it was characterized. And when I say characterized, the way that you knew without it being verbalized at all times, there was ways that the artist was able to kind of show you. And I think it was done in very, very well. And I'm saying that as someone that doesn't have CP, so I'm speaking from a very outward perspective on this. I love the fact that we're following a main character by the name of Bayon, who loves to dance. She's super passionate about dance. It is her favorite thing. She's really talented on it. But she pushes back on any adults or peers who are like, oh, you like to dance? That's so inspirational because you're disabled. And so we have these conversations going on about inspiration porn and its relationship to the disabled community, and how those of us who are not disabled make ourselves feel better by considering disabled people to be exceptional just for being humans. And I've had to check myself on that in the past 5 or 6 years and reckon with my own biases there. And so seeing these conversations appear in books that are targeted for a younger audience is super great. And I love that we have a main character that is very outwardly spoken about. I am not inspirational because I love to dance and I can dance. Like, I'm disabled, I like to dance. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. That's about it. So I like that we get that pushback, but Baehan is a very hard character to root for. She's not always the greatest friend, and a lot of the conflict is rooted in the fact that she does have a peer who uses her as inspiration porn and really gets a lot of clout online for it. And so she wants to beat him at something and end up going viral. And it ends up consuming her in a way that's not really healthy. I thought that the relationship between her and her mother was very interesting. The conflicts there, her mother is very firm, I think, in her expectations and boundaries. And I am too as a parent, and I'm not sure if I was super fond in how the mother was necessarily depicted. So this was a tough one because I think it hit some high notes, but then there were some other notes about it that I was not a fan of. I thought the artwork was beautiful. I thought the representation was great, but man, it was one of those situations where you have a main character who it's like you want them to feel empowered, you understand where they're coming from, or you empathize with where they're coming from, but it's just like they're not always the best person. Granted, I do know that these are kids and kids do behave in this way, but it's not above critique whenever I'm consuming it. So I believe I only ended up giving that one 3 stars. I will check out works from this author in the future. That one just didn't hit as many high notes as I wanted it to. Okay, so after that, I ended up picking up another 5-star read. Another one that I ended up finishing in a day, and another one that I was not expecting to be 5 stars. So mind you, I was like, oh, check this out from the library. It's one of the situations I need to finish it so I could turn it back in. Same thing with Red. I had checked it out. I needed to turn it back into the library, and so I ended up reading it. This. The Wicked Ones. So I wanted to read this because the 3rd Dark Ascension novel, which was written by Hasfa Faisal, came out a couple of weeks ago, maybe at the top of the release year. It came out, and I didn't realize that this was going to be a series, and so I had investigated it more. I remember when this one came out, but then each one has a different author. The second one is about Captain Hook, and like I said, the 3rd one is written by Hasfa, and it is about Jafar. So these are fairy tale retellings that tell you the origin stories of what we know as Disney villains, right? There are a lot of different Disney, as a matter of fact, I think we put them in here. Like, there are a lot of Disney stories that exist that are kind of a play on what we know based off of the movies. And when I decided to read this one, I was like, I've heard good things about Robin Benway as a writer. And I was like, I'm just gonna read it because I really wanted to read Hospice, not gonna lie. The cover for that one is banging, and I love how they redid the covers for these because the older covers didn't really do these books justice. But I love the Jafar cover, and I was like, well, I'm gonna give the other two a try and see where I land. So I was like, okay, pick this one up first. It was the first one to release. It's the story of the Wicked Stepsisters, how they became the Wicked Stepsisters, Drizella and Anastasia. Y'all, this book hurt my feelings. I was blown away. I was like, okay, I knew Robin Benway had, some oomph behind the name, but what in the actual hell? This book right here, this was an easy 5-star read. Like I said, it focuses on Drizella and Anastasia, and it starts with Lady Tremaine's story though, and I wasn't expecting that. And you have to know her story because her experience informs how she treats her two daughters, and it then informs their experience, which then informs how they treat Cinderella. So this is not only a case study in these characters, it's a case study in trauma, cycles, and what happens when you don't break this cycle. What exactly can go wrong? And Cinderella does make appearances in this, but it's not about her. It explains why the sisters end up so frustrated with her, because at the end of the day, when everything comes to a head, there's no one else that they can blame, and something goes left because they try to help her, and then their lives are essentially ruined for it, and so they blame her. It's so unfortunate because you see Anastasia fall in love. You see Drizella find a motherly figure that she needs, that she doesn't have. And these two experience love, I think, in two very different ways, but love nevertheless, because it's love that their mother ultimately can't give them. And so they find it, and then it's taken from them. And it's like, and it's so bad. It's just one of those stories where you are like, no. Like, things are gonna go right. It's gonna be fine. And then you have to remind yourself, like, no, this is the Dark Ascension series. And so you learn exactly why things go wrong. And it reminds me, and I hate to do this, but I've seen Wicked like a million times at this point, but it reminds me of that opening scene in Wicked where they're singing No One Mourns the Wicked, and there is a little girl who asks, like, basically, are people born wicked? And Glinda says, like, that's a good question. Like, are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? And so it's one of these situations, once again, where we're learning how these characters weren't born evil. They're not inherently evil. They are a product of circumstance and environment. And, you know, some people are able to not go in that direction. Cinderella being an example, like, she's in an environment where there's nothing but hatred. At this point, by the time you get to the end, it's just a very hatred-fueled environment. And Lady Tremaine is abusive to all three of the girls. I think that that's the thing that I was like most surprised by, is because we're so used to seeing the physical and verbal and emotional abuse experienced by Cinderella, not understanding that Anastasia and Drizelle also went through that same abuse. And it's something that makes them empathize with her. But the two of them could not break the cycle. They could not get out of it. Whereas you have Cinderella, who could have also been a product of her environment, but didn't fall into the same circumstances. But I also think that she had very much so different opportunities to not fall into the circumstances. So it was such a complex book thematically when we're talking about trauma and nature versus nurture, and thinking about that line from Wicked. It hurt. This broke my heart. This book hurt my feelings, and I was shocked. I was like, hurt my feelings. This book hurt my feelings horribly. But I thought it was very well done, very well written, very great character development, and I'm so excited. I did not buy the second book. I'm going through this thing now where, like, one, I only really want to buy books like out of my money. I receive books from publishers, but books with my money, I really only want to buy books with my money that I have read and that I've highly rated and are my favorites. So that's why I bought this one and not the second and third, because I may read the second and third ones and be like, yeah, no, I didn't like those. So I'm not gonna push myself to have those on my shelf. But I do know that this first one was great, and I do have the second one. Like I said, that's about Captain Hook, written by Lauren DeStefano. So I will be reading that one next. And then at some point I will be getting to Jafar's book, which I'm very, very excited for that. And so after that, I went through some more library hauls that I needed to get finished. And one of them ended up being another 5-star read. Don't worry, it goes downhill after this. Like, I have one other 5-star read, but I knew I was getting too lucky because I was like, 5-star, 5-star, 5. I said, what is going on? And if you know me, I don't give out 5 stars like that at all. I don't give out 5 stars like that. But I was shocked by this one. I ended up reading this one for my Goodreads choice vlog, so I'm not going to really talk about that one too much. I'm not going to get that vlog out until the end of February, beginning of March. I don't care that it's super late, that it won't be as relevant. I don't care. It's a project that I put a lot of work into, and I'm excited. I'm loving doing it, but I'm taking my time with it because it is a lot of books that I've been having to read for it. But I ended up reading That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. I can't remember how to say her last name. Y'all, I have not read a YA thriller mystery this good in a minute, okay? This one had my jaw on the floor. It had me gagged, okay? Sick. Sorry, Karen McManus. Sorry, Hallie Jackson. Y'all not touching my girl Megan, okay? Y'all not touching Megan. This was pure fire. I'm gonna talk about it more in that vlog, but pure fire. So fire. Immediately she had a new book drop on January 7th. I got on that whole list so quick, and I cannot wait to read it. This book was so good. Oh my gosh. This book was so good, y'all. This was such a good thriller. Okay, so after that I ended up reading Oshi No Ko Volume 6. I can't really tell you much about this, y'all, because we're at Volume 6 in the series. I can say that I do feel like we're losing the plot. I really love Oshi No Ko when it started. I think it's a very different type of series. You kind of have to get past that first volume because it is kind of strange. But I did like the mystery aspect of it, and kind of this reincarnation piece to it. But we've lost it. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of explanations related to method acting, how the theater works, and I'm like, that's great, but what about the plot that we had in like volume 2 and 3? We've kind of lost that. I was fine with the theater explanations in volume 5, but I got kind of aggravated with the kind of conflict between 2 side characters and this emphasis on this adaptation of this manga, and I'm like, what? Like, no. I'm here for the juicy, messy mystery, and we've lost it. So I only ended up giving that one 3 stars. Then after that, I ended up listening to Emma and the Love Spell by Meredith Ireland. I highly do not recommend listening to this book on audio. It was not a great audiobook experience, and I'm wondering if how I feel about it is slightly influenced by like the audiobook experience. I don't know. It's a shorter middle grade book. It is a paranormal, it's paranormal. It has a romance in it, a kind of blooming first romance, and it is queer, and it is kind of on the contemporary side. I was looking forward to this one because I haven't seen a lot of queer paranormal, like middle grade, that also touches on a first blossoming crush and is queer. Like, it's a very interesting combination. It does focus on a main character by the name of Emma, who is a witch. She is adopted by her parents, and she is Korean. And it's interesting because I feel like Meredith was attempting to talk a little bit about how adoption, if you're a parent or caregiver that's adopting, right, and you're adopting a child that does not share the same cultural background as you, it is imperative as a parent and caregiver that you allow that child to have experiences with their culture of what would have been their birth parents. And I think that she didn't really delve much into that, as opposed to our main character Emma is a witch, and she knows nothing about being a witch because she's adopted. And I felt like maybe she was trying to parallel that conversation, but kind of doing it in a way that would make sense for a younger audience. I felt like as an adult, I kind of got those parallels a little bit more than I would anticipate a younger reader to get it, which is fine because this is intended for a younger audience. But Emma is she has a very, very close friend, Evangeline, and Evangeline's parents are getting a divorce. And because they're going to be getting a divorce, Evangeline is going to have to move. And Emma doesn't want her to move. That's her best friend. Also now someone that she's realizing, oh, I have feelings for this person as well. I don't want to lose her. Like, she means a lot to me. And so she decides to concoct a love spell that will make Evangeline's parents fall back in love. They stay married, and so Evangeline inevitably would not have to move. Well, of course, we know at the end of the day, as adults, that's not realistic. I do think that it's great conversation about divorce in this, and I think it's important for older kids to be able to see that. So, I know of quite a few picture books that talk about different types of families. I've used those in my own household to help me have conversations with my kid about why it's just the two of us. Or, like conversations about divorce. But it's nice to see this in a younger middle grade book as well. There are other middle grade books that do it, but I was very happy with the way that was done, where it's like, it gets to a point where sometimes parents just do not get along. Like, it's not going to work. As much as you want it to work, it's not going to work. And we see the tension between the parents, which I thought was very unique and very well done. It was done in a way where we know there was conflict, and the conflict was making the kids uncomfortable. And it was very evident that these two humans did not need to be in a household together. And it's very true to what kids experience, that embarrassment, that secondhand embarrassment, that fear of the parents being separated, that sadness that comes with, two adults in a household arguing. And it's very, even when my parents would argue, even though they're not divorced, well, my first set of my biological parents, yes, but when my mom and my stepdad would argue, it's awkward. Like, it's very awkward. It's a very, very awkward situation, especially parents who have disagreements in front of their kids. So I thought that was very well done. I thought that the budding romance between Emma and Evangeline was also well done, because it took a very thoughtful and charming approach to it. It's clear that the two of these kids are friends. They really care about each other. They love about each other, and they're trying to navigate, like, oh, I think I like you. Like, what do we do about this? Like, how do I express that I like you, but like I like you, like you? I thought that that was done well. There were also some great conversations about the persecution of witches, which I think was very much so, once again, it's like those paralleling conversations that she had about some social commentary, and I think that that was well done. I think that there were plot holes in this book. There was not a lot of information about the world build. Like, there's no world building in it. We know that Emma is a witch, but outside of some brief mentions of persecutions, I don't think world building wise, like, there was much there. It was very much so centered on conversations about the divorce and Emma and Evangeline figuring out their feelings, which is fine. But that could have been done without the witchy element if we weren't going to develop it in the end. And I say that I'm trying to tiptoe because spoiler wise, but there were decisions that she made in the beginning of the book that did not follow through to the end. And so there were pieces and parts that I felt like were missing. And I wish that she would have done a little bit more. It definitely gives that cozy fantasy, cozy paranormal vibe, which is not what I think I would have wanted from this. I've read cozy fantasy before. It's worked. I've loved it. But in this situation, I wanted a little bit more. I also think the pacing of this one was off at times. So there were moments where I was like super invested in the story and other times where I felt like the story was extremely slow and I couldn't have been bothered with it. So yeah, but I did end up giving that one 3 stars. All right, the next one that I ended up reading was Gail Forman's new book, Afterlife. This was a new release that came out on the 7th. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. It's done in Gail Forman true fashion. I wasn't particularly blown away. We have a main character by the name of Amber. It's told initially in her perspective, and she goes home and her mom is pulling into the garage and she freaks out and she's hollering and then she's like, who's this girl with you? Like, who are these? Like, who's this girl that's with you? Like, mom, why, like, what's the big deal? Like, why are you looking at me like that? Come to find out, Amber's dead. And so she's been dead for a number of years. I think like 7 years at the point that the novel begins. She's been dead for a while and Amber doesn't realize she's dead. And so her mother's kind of like, you can't be here. And funny enough, the girl that was with her mother is her sister who has now grown up. And so she kind of gets to see how her death has impacted not only her family, but the community. This is one of those novels where everything is interconnected, and Gail Forman wrote it through an ass of perspectives. And I think that's probably the one thing that was kind of like, I was not a huge fan of, is that it was told from so many different perspectives down to the teacher. But it was important to know because how the teacher perceived Amber and his relationship that he has with another woman is connected to her son, who's also connected to Amber and her family. It's a lot of interconnectedness, and I think that it was a very solid look at the impact of grief and how we grieve differently and how culturally grieving is different. How the Western world grieves is very different than other parts of the world, and how we pay our respects to the dead, how we treat the dead is very different across a variety of cultures, and I like that she addressed that. I think that I wasn't like, Amber was obsessed when she came back with a boyfriend, and I didn't care. I mean, I should have cared because it did negatively impact him, and at one point he was blamed for her death, and it had a lot of issues connected to the family and her dad, and it was a lot of like how he grieved was very different than like the dad, how he grieved was very different than how the mother grieved, and his grief definitely made him do some things that were out of line that inevitably destroyed some relationships. It was a solid read. Like I said, it was done in typical Gail Forman fashion whenever she tackles difficult topics. I wasn't particularly blown away. It was an okay book, like I said, with 3 stars. I then ended up reading Harley Quinn Volume 1 No Good Deed by Stephanie Phillips. I have read part of this after reading more about DC's future state. This takes place post Joker War, and so we're getting a new version of Harley. There are a lot of thoughts and feelings about Harley Quinn post Joker War because she definitely softens up. She becomes more of a morally gray character. At this time, Poison Ivy is also missing. So part of it is her reminiscing on their relationship. This is where Stephanie Phillips outwardly says Harley and Ivy are in a relationship. They're queer. It's always been played with, but this is definitely on page romantic relationship between the two of them. It was okay. I wasn't necessarily impressed with it as a series opener. I think that the idea of old school villains now searching for purpose and meaning is interesting. And I think some conversations that we see between Scarecrow and Hugo Strange at the end, I think those were intriguing because Scarecrow plays a big role in the whole concept of what future state looked like in Gotham. But it was fine. I mean, I trust Stephanie Phillips as a writer. Her potential, like what she could do with this character. But it was just a solid series opener. It wasn't anything that I was like, oh, fantastic, mind blowing. I think the art was super inconsistent. Because Laura Bragger did the opening and the closing artwork for this, and it was phenomenal. And then in between, Riley Rossmo did the art, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, so there's that. But I did end up giving it 3 stars. I'm trying to hurry this up, y'all. Apparently I read a lot. I'm talking a lot. All right, I read another new release. New releases already not hitting, y'all. New releases are not hitting already. I ended up reading The Last Bookstore on Earth by Lily Braun Arnold. I was looking forward to this one. This is a post-apocalyptic, dystopian, queer book that I thought was going to be great. We are living in a world where there apparently has been a storm, and things go left, and we are linked up with our main character Liz, who essentially lives in this bookstore, and she not only, you know, gives out books, but she also serves as kind of like a post office of sorts for people to be able to get letters and stuff to other people. I gave this 2.5 stars. I thought that the relationship between Liz and Maeve was endearing. I thought it was charming. I think they were very contrasting characters, where Liz definitely was so attached to that bookstore. She didn't really leave. She didn't have any survival instincts, whereas Maeve had been through a bit more, and her survival instincts were just 100% like on the nose. And seeing them contrasting each other but also seamlessly working together was nice, and the scenes of them at the end was very nice as well. And conversations about addressing past traumas, I thought that those were done very well. However, if y'all are going to start doing books that are paranormal, dystopian, fantasy, whatever, the romance, just leaning into the romance is not going to help anymore. I am not going to be kind or I'll be kind to the author, but I'm not going to be gentle in my reviews anymore. And I'm not going to give it a pass just because it's a young adult book and it's writing for a different audience. That does not excuse it, because listen, we grew up, bread and butter was YA dystopian, okay? The world building in this was not existent. All right, so if you are a person that's interested in post-apocalyptic stuff, you like, you know, The Last of Us is the first thing that I think of as like comping for interest purposes. This ain't it. This is not it. This is not it, because the idea of understanding what happened to the earth is very minimally touched on. The survival aspect of it, very minimally touched on. It's not really a center or focus of the book. The book is focused on the relationship between Lily and Maeve and the emotional issues that come with being in a post-apocalyptic world. You can have those elements and still have some world building. I don't know when world building became a thing that we no longer have to center. I don't know where, you know, now it's like, okay, well, I'm going to focus in on the romance and write a romance book. If you are going to write a book that takes place outside of our contemporary world, you need to have some world building. There was no world building in this. There is a scene in which someone gets injured by sticking their hand in a generator, their arm gets fried, and we don't have any medical attention besides wrapping it and it healing slowly over time. First of all, to have a wound open like that, it would have been prone to an infection in that type of environment without necessary medical equipment and supplies. It would not have healed on its own, and that character would have been at risk for dying and should have been at risk for dying. There's no way you can adequately give me a description of someone's arm being completely fried because of the fact that they stuck their hand in a generator to get it to work and then they're fine. That's medically, that doesn't make sense. And so the entire time that the arm was mentioned, I'm like, how are you still alive? You're prone to infection. You have an open wound. And we're not talking like a baby scratch or a cut. We're talking about a major wound on your arm. Your arm has been fried. There's no way that you could not have received any sufficient medical attention and not have been at risk for infection. It made no... Let me stop. I was so frustrated by this book because I feel like there was so much potential, but it lacked the emotion and depth that I think I was looking for. It set it up and did not follow through, and I'm quite tired of we're having these situations as backdrops for romances. I can't do it anymore. Like, stop. It's not saying that you have to take the romance out of your book. That's fine. That's dandy. That's whatever. But stop using these elements as backdrops and expecting people not to catch on and critique. Like, well, what's going on in the background? Where's the world building? Where's the conversation about the world? Getting away with a couple of paragraphs is not going to cut anymore, and I'm not finna let that slide this year. So, I say all that to say, 2.5 stars. If I keep running across books like this for the rest of the year, they will be reviewed as such. The days in which, oh, 3 stars, I understand, this is for... No. I'm gonna come at you because I expect more at this point. So, I know that this is a debut, but no. 2.5 stars. After that, I read about 1 graphic novel, 1 manga, and 2 manhwa. No, 1 graphic novel, 2 manga, 2 manhwa. Okay, I'm trying to get my stuff together. All right, so let's start with the graphic novel. So I ended up reading New Girl. This is a middle grade graphic novel by Cassandra Kalin. This came out last year. I was on hold for it. I was waiting for the copy came in. It finally came in, so I decided to read it. This was good. This was solid. This was good. I gave it 4 stars. I thought the artwork was fantastic. We're focusing on a main character by the name of Leah, who ends up moving from Romania to Canada. She's just thrown into the school, doesn't speak French, speaks English a little bit, speaks Romanian, and is like, what am I doing here? I did not ask to leave Romania. That is home. Why am I here? She ends up meeting a group of friends that are all from different places all over the world, and they are all engaging in different languages. They switch between English and French and different languages of their native countries. It's very interesting, and it's loosely based off of Cassandra's own experience, which I think is pretty cool. This book is a period power book. We typically, whenever we talk about graphic novels, I don't know where my copy, oh, it's back there. When we talk about graphic novels and periods, especially middle grade graphic novels and periods, we often think about go with the flow. That is always like the highest, like the most common, I should say, recommendation that people give. This one starts off with Leah getting her period in the airport. And there are conversations about her cycle and how intense it is and how it makes her feel and how it affects her body. And she talks about it with her peers and how they're either some of them don't have their periods yet, or those that do have it, their periods are different. Like, you know, oh, well, I have cramps. My cramps are not intense as yours. Her mother's very open and having conversations about, well, maybe we need to go see your doctor if your period pain is becoming too much. Excellent. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to do a video recommendation period at some point where I talk about youth literature that has period representation in it. But I love the artwork in this. I gave it 4 stars. I did think it ended a little abruptly at the end. Clearly this is going to be a series. There's no listings or anything for when a book 2 possibly is going to come out. Because this came out summer of last year, we may not get anything until either really late this year or early 2026. But I will say be prepared for that because it does end abruptly. But we are going to be getting more in the series to my knowledge. I did read 2 manhwa. I read The Dangerous Convenience Store, which I bought a while ago and had been meaning to read off of my shelf. So I have knocked off a couple of things off of my shelf this month already. Very, very proud of myself. I just need to make sure I keep it up. This is very smutty. 18 plus. I know I talk about kids and all type of stuff with my graphic novels. I'm going to tell y'all right now, please be mindful. When I say adult graphic novels, I mean 18 up for some of this stuff. Because there's some stuff I would not recommend for under 18. 18 plus. There's a parental advisory on this one. There's extreme explicit content. There is a explicit scene in this that goes on 4 pages. I was very shocked by it. But I enjoyed this. There's no plot. There's not a lot of character development. It is literally about a guy who works at a convenience store and is dangerous. He meets a guy whom, you know, he gets to know, and he's like, you know, well, I have been trying to date this guy, but he's treated me like not nice. I'm trying to get over him. And so the guy is like, well, I can help you get over him. Whatever the case may be, he's an older guy, so it's kind of like an age gap romance thing. He's in college. And so they hook up. That's it. 4 stars. I feel like I enjoyed this a lot more than I should have. I'm gonna have to buy this series because there's no getting this at the library. No getting this whatsoever. But 4 stars. I enjoyed it. The other manhwa that I read, my 4th 5-star read of the year, The Remarried Empress, Volume 5. Woo child, I hate the Emperor in this so much. I hate this man. I hate this man with a passion. He's disgusting. He's atrocious. He's horrible. He's I knew he was bad, but this particular volume, we spent a lot of time learning more about him as a person and his plots and his schemes, and he's a horrible person. That's all I can say because this is volume 5. But I did give it 5 stars. The 2 manga that I ended up reading, y'all will be proud of me. I read Nana Volume 3. I know from my spinner wheel, I said that I didn't know if I was going to choose 9 and 10, but most likely I was going to go ahead and do 3 and 4 of Nana as a representative for me picking off of that shelf. I did end up reading Volume 3. I forgot how hard this volume is because Nana Komatsu deals with some relationship issues in this one, and it was really, really hard to read. It was sad. I really, really felt for her, especially because I know of things later on in the series. Like, my heart broke for her in this one, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the last thing that I read, because I need to return to the library, is How I Met My Soulmate by Anna Shen. This is the same creator of Waiting for Spring, which I do own, I think maybe the first 4 volumes of that series on my shelf. And it's cute because this opens up with the main character reading Waiting for Spring. And so we're following Yuki, who's 20 years old. She's in college. And she is looking for her soulmate. And so her best friend's like, let's go out. Let's go to a club and meet some people. And she's like, yeah, no. And I want to be like, no, like that's not how we meet soulmates. It's not in the club. But she ends up meeting this guy who was at the cover, who ends up getting like wasted, and he's kind of harsh towards her, but also he's like, you need to be safe in these situations, like don't tell these men where you live or whatever. So she ends up like helping take care of him and stuff, and they build like an unlikely friendship because she tells him like in the past she's only had like one really huge crush on this guy who she made bento boxes for when he was going to cram school, and she never really did anything with the relationship because it just never happened. So she's like, I'm trying to meet my soulmate, and he's like, oh, I'll set up some mixers. And of course, naturally, we know that he's gonna have feelings for her, she's gonna have feelings for him, but then there's a little something else, somebody from the past coming back, and so there's a potential love triangle on this. Don't know how I feel about that just yet, but I did like this volume. I did enjoy it. 4-star read for me, and I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of the series. All right, y'all, I know that was long. But I had to do a mid-month because, to be fair, if I didn't do a mid-month, y'all, okay, it would not be fun to do the final wrap-up of January. It was not going to be fun. It was not going to be fun at all, and I was not going to do that to myself, to have to wrap up all this stuff. But yeah, those are all the books I read in January so far. Let me know in the comments down below what you've read so far in January. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notification. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links and links to follow me on social media too will be down in the description bar below. And I'll be back with another video soon. Bye!